I'm drinking eucalyptus thyme tea because I've got a cold. I may do a lot of coughing during tonight's broadcast, so please forgive me in advance. Someone was kind enough to share their respiratory infection with me. That's honey from my husband's hive. He has beehives. Put a little bit of honey in there. So, welcome to our third broadcast on leap year of I died NDE. We're going to be talking about Haints. Haint. Haint. So what is a Haint? The word originates in early African American lore. It is believed to be a derivative of the word haunt. It originates with the Gullah Geechee people who live in South Carolina and parts of Georgia, who originated in West Africa and were brought over as slaves. They strongly believe in ghosts and spirits. So the word haint is interchangeable when referring to a ghost, or in hoodoo belief is a witch-like creature. Sorry. That is believed to chase people down and chase some people to their death. So are you afraid of haints? You want to keep them out of your home? The Gullah Geechee would tell you to paint the ceiling of your entranceway, your porch, blue, a light blue, because allegedly when the haints come on your porch to get into your house, they see the blue and they confuse it with sky and they fly up into that and they leave you alone. So the nature of the haint is not warm and fuzzy. Haints are no Casper the Friendly Ghost. They are believed to be angry spirits trapped between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Some of the Gullah Geechee even use stories of haints to scare their children away from bad behavior. Kind of like the European, or they call us Buckra. So a white person is Buckra in Gullah Geechee. This is the way that we talk about boogeymen. Did your mom ever say, sorry, did your mother ever tell you that you need to behave or the boogeyman's going to get you? Well, that's how legend of Haints is used in a Gullah Geechee. So I'm going to share with you a Gullah Geechee story about the headless haint. This is going to take you back to the early 1800s in North America here. This man and woman were walking along the street or along a road. And it was dark and rainy and miserably cold. And they were soaked to the bone. They had a long way to go, and the mud was just sucking at their feet and coating their clothing. It was just miserable. So up in the distance they saw a glimmering light. So they walked toward it, and it was an old plantation type house. And they could see the fire that was crackling in the living room, the smoke from the chimney. And it looked warm and it looked comforting. So they went around to the back door and knocked, hoping that they would be let in where they could dry out a little bit. Now, if you've lived in the South, you know that this story is about an African-American couple because a white person would have gone to the front door, so these people went to the back door, knocked on the door, and a voice said, come in, please come in. So they went in, and it was the entranceway to the kitchen. And on the stove was a bubbling pot of rabbit stew, and there was on the countertop cornmeal and flour and ingredients for bread. And as they went in, they're saying, hello, hello, is anyone here? Nobody there. So they look at each other and they look at that there's a table that was set for 2 people. But nobody there. They waited a bit, they kept hollering, anybody home? Smelling this stew making, and they decided they were, you don't want to waste the food. So the man took a bucket and went out to get water to make coffee to the well house. And the woman made some cornbread. Now, if you've ever had traditional Southern cornbread, it's wonderful. I can just imagine what it was like to have that rabbit stew with a good piece of cornbread and a stout, strong cup of coffee. So while he was out getting water, she made the bread and was just setting the table when she heard a voice from the doorway that went into the house saying, welcome, welcome. And she looked up, and in the shadows she could see a tall man dressed in a fine jacket and a high-neck starch white shirt and shiny shoes, and obviously a gentleman type person. And as he stepped closer into the light, or on the threshold between light and dark, she saw that he had no head. She gasped, "Oh my Lord, what do you want me to do now?" "Oh, good Lord, please tell me what I need to do about this." And so then the voice said to her, it began talking even though it didn't have a head. So this voice was just kind of floating in out of the air. And he told her that robbers had come to the house and robbed him because he obviously had money. And in those days, people hid their money in places. They didn't have banks. And when he wouldn't tell them where his money was hidden, they took him to the cellar and they cut his head off. They buried his body in one place, they buried the head in another. And he was in misery, he said. He could not rest. He was trapped between the dark and the light because he wasn't whole. About this time, the man comes back from outside and he drops the bucket on the floor and looking at this spectacle of this headless person talking. And he says, "What in the name of the Lord do you want?" So again, the Haint explained he can't rest until he's reunited with his head. Would they follow him down into the darkness of the cellar and dig his head up, bury it with him? Well, the two of them looked at each other, this is very strange and it's frightening, with goosebumps all over them and their knees shaking. They said, "But it's dark, how are we going to see to go down there?" And the Haint reaches over to the fireplace and lights his arm on fire. And it went up like a torch. And he said, "Follow me." And he turned slowly. And he led them down the hallway, opened a door, went down slowly down the flight of stairs into the cellar with his arm on fire. And they followed him. Once they got down into the cellar, he turned and he said, "My head's buried there. If you'll dig it up, put it in the grave with me, and you could see the larger hole where his body had lain. I'll tell you where my riches are. So they dug the putrefying head up, gently put it into the hole, and as the Haint climbed into the hole, he pointed to another point of the cellar and said, "Those are my riches. You're the first people that asked what I wanted in the name of the Lord. So I give you my property, my house, my farmland. It's yours." There's a piece of paper on the kitchen table declaring that it's yours. And use it in good health. Thank you for laying me to rest. Whereupon he lay down with his head. They covered him over, dug a hole where he had pointed, and sure enough, it was quite a bit of money for people in that day and age. And they actually lived in this house for the rest of their lives, as very comfortably as rich people, rich, free Gullah Geechee. Quite a story, huh? That Haint wasn't too frightening. All he wanted was to be reunited with his head. But I have a story that's a little more recent for you. It's my story. And I would like your input whether you think what visited me was a Haint or not. My mother, in 2005, was in a wound care facility. She had decided she was going to move in with us. We'd been trying to get her to move in with us for years. And she finally, her doctor called and said, I've convinced your mom to go ahead and let you take care of her. She was resistant to living with us because our lifestyle is very different from what she liked. She was upper crust, Beacon Hill, Boston high society, and we are down home homesteaders raising our own food. We kind of reject the people that put on airs and their pinky in the air when they drink their tea. But I'm an only child, and she was a widow, and she finally, with her diabetes that was so bad, she had open sores on her legs. And her doctor said, she really needs to come live with you. I've told her that. I've told her to quit being so proud. Go see your daughter. But you have to check her into a facility where they can heal the wounds on her legs before she actually goes into your home. So that's what I did. And on the morning, I went to pick her up. The nurse was just getting her dressed. And she was sitting on the edge of her bed. And she said, "Honey, would you rub my shoulder right here? I've got a lot of pain." And I leaned over and grabbed her muscles here and started to rub them, and she dropped dead in my arms. Gone. We tried to revive her. It didn't work. About 3 or 4 weeks later, we had her cremated, and I went and I got her ashes. And had her in our living room. She had wanted to be buried under some fruit trees. So we're trying to decide how to do that. We knew we would be moving from South Florida to somewhere. So we just kept her on the shelf there. And so if you believe that someone's spirit stays with their remains for a certain length of time, that's where Mom's ashes were. And I was asleep, laying on my left side, kind of curled up. I kind of sleep in a fetal position. And I felt someone sit on the bed in that little curve that your body makes when your knees are bent and your hands are up here. Someone sat down on the edge of the bed literally compressed, and they put their hand on my hip, like hand on my hip, and shook me. I kind of started to wake up, and then they shook me harder. And when I opened my eyes, I saw a figure that looked like just an outline of a woman. Shoulders, head, the outline of a woman. And she was a big woman, and my mother was a big woman. And it was not a good feeling. It was a fearful feeling. She was dark and broody, and she shook my hip again. And I'm like, who are you? What do you want? Heart was in my throat, pounding. I could hear my husband behind me snoring. And when I said, who are you? What do you want? He woke up, rolled over, and did a double take. He saw the outline, but when he rolled over and saw the outline, it went poof. He's like, what was that? I don't know. That was probably about 3 a.m. The next day, as I was getting dressed and I was pulling my pants up and I went over my hip, it hurt. And I turned and I looked in the mirror, and there was a red mark on my hip where she had, or whoever it was, had grabbed me. And that stayed kind of a shallow bruise for a few days. I told a friend of mine who was a ghost hunter in the Carolinas about it, and she says, Lisa, that was an unhappy spirit, and you need to pray for it to find its way back where it needs to be. Don't embrace it. Don't try to interact with it. Pray that it goes away, because it's after no good. So was that a haint? Was it an unhappy spirit? Was it Mom? Was it Mom saying, get up and put my ashes somewhere? I don't know. But it was not a good feeling, and I've got goosebumps telling you about it. So what do you think? Was it Mom, or was it someone else? And why would they grab my hip hard enough to bruise me in the shape of a hand? I mean, I had bruises like fingertips on the back of my hip and a thumbprint on the front. It's like a hand. Explain that. Can you? What do you think? That's my leap year story for you, 2024. I look forward to seeing you in the live broadcast that's following this one. Give me a 5-minute break between this video and the live to start. And we'll talk about it if you're interested. Thanks for stopping by. Cheers.